Dave Talks Comics, Episode 113, Heroes Con 2016, Part 1. Welcome to Dave Talks Comics, the program where I talk about comic books, cartoons, and comic book conventions. Most episodes are a mix of summary and opinion and include spoilers. Please keep that in mind. Spoilers. All past episodes can be streamed or downloaded from the program's website, DaveTalksComics.com. This episode begins my coverage of Heroes Con 2016 in Charlotte, North Carolina. On this episode, I will be talking about what it was like driving from Washington, D.C. to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I stopped along the way, what podcasts I listened to, what I had to eat, and so on and so forth. You can find my blog posts on HeroesCon 2011 and 2012 and podcasts on HeroesCon 2014 and 2015 at DaveTalksComics.com. Look for the name HeroesCon in the convention section on the right-hand side of the page and click it. You might have to scroll down a little bit to find it. HeroesCon 2016 begins tomorrow. It's about 9:15 on Thursday night, June 16th. I'm at the hotel. I spent a good chunk of today driving here. I left later than I wanted to. I got a late start. I decided to rent a car this year because my car's kind of old. It's over 20 years old, and it's been giving me a little bit of trouble over the last couple of years. And so I decided I wanted to rent a car. And when I looked into the pricing, it didn't seem all that outrageous. So I picked up the car at 9 o'clock. I didn't actually leave until about 10:20 because I had an errand to run before then. I had to go back to my apartment, pick up my luggage, and had to run this errand. Had to take something back to my apartment. By the time I left, it was, like I said, about 10:20. I got to say, it's worked out very nicely with this rental car. There's a few things that it has which my car does not. It really makes me realize how primitive my car is. The first thing that it has is it has air conditioning, and it always seems to be warm when I drive down to Heroes Con, and today was no exception. I think the temperature got up into the low to mid-90s today, so it was nice having the air conditioning, and I definitely noticed it when I got out of the car. The other thing was that the seats are much more comfortable than the seats in my car. I mean, I suppose I really could and should by now have gotten some sort of a cushion for my lower back, but one of the reasons why in prior years and when I make these long-distance trips that I stop so frequently is because my lower back gives me pain, and I didn't experience any of that today. And I only made 3 stops on the drive down. And it took me, including stops, 9 hours and 20 minutes or something like, 8 hours and 20 minutes. 8 hours and 20 minutes. So I left at 10:20. My first stop was at 11:45 at Sheetz in Bealton, Virginia, which is just off of Route 29. Actually, it's right on Route 29. And I've been there before. I went out 66 and then down 29. And I don't know, it's maybe 20 or 30 miles down 29 before you get to this Sheetz. And I was ready to stretch my legs. It was probably about time to put some gas in the car, and I did that, even though it wasn't nearly empty. Car has a nice meter that tells you how long you've got till you need to put more gas in the car, and I think I had like 90 miles or something like that to go. But I decided to fill it up. I was a little hungry, even though I had eaten breakfast not too long before. And so I had part of my lunch then. I ended up being there for about a half hour. What I'd brought with me was some chicken that I'd bought at Whole Foods, along with some cucumbers and some tomatoes. And I also brought some pita bread, so I put that mixture into the pita bread, and I had about half of that at the first stop. And then I took off. I wasn't sure where I was going to stop next, and I ended up driving for a lot longer than I thought I would. My second stop was in Madison Heights, Virginia. I think that's correct, which is close to Lynchburg. And that was about 2 hours and 10 minutes after my first stop. So it was almost 2:30 by the time I made that second stop. And I had the rest of the chicken, tomatoes, cucumber, and pita bread then. Used the bathroom. I was making recordings as I went down, but I decided to re-record all this in a way. I decided that I wanted to, I don't know, there was just a lot of hemming and hawing, and I just wasn't sure what to say. So once I got to the hotel, once I'd had something to eat, I sat down, and I wrote out all the things that I thought I wanted to talk about. Basically the things, for the most part, that I'd talked about in my recordings in the car. And now I'm re-recording it. So that was my second stop. And so I left there. It was almost 3 o'clock when I left there. It was about 10 till 3. Now, all along this, I was listening to podcasts. I loaded up my tablet with podcasts, something like 14 or 15 hours worth of podcasts. The big one that I listened to is one called Reply All. Reply All did this series recently, and I didn't know about the Reply All podcast until just recently. I found out about it through another podcast that I listened to called Crime Writers On. And I found out about Crime Writers On because I used to listen to the Serial podcast. And there's a number of podcasts that have been about Serial, where people discuss Serial. And Crime Writers On has been the best one that I've found that discusses Serial. And they do discussions on a lot more than just Serial. And the reason why it's called Crime Writers On is because the people who were on the pod, it's a panel of 4 people. And although there's some occasional guests in there who come in, all 4 of them are true crime writers. So they write books on true crime, and some of them I think are also reporters. At least one of them is a defense attorney and a licensed private investigator. And I think they do an excellent job at covering, Serial Season 2. I missed their coverage of Serial Season 1, and I haven't gone back to listen to it. So the most recent episode, which was called Crime Writers on True Crime and Shines Bright Like King Diamond, they had listened to this 4-episode run from the Reply All podcast, which they said was similar to the first season of Serial, which was all about Anand Syed and Heyman Lee, who was murdered. And Anand is in jail, has been in jail for, 15 years or something like that? No, I think that's a little more than that, because I think she was killed in 1999. So, but he was convicted for killing her, and she had been his girlfriend. And I think it was a 12-part series done on Serial, which was the first season of Serial. And so they said this was similar to that, and it was the closest thing. Well, that's what they ended up saying. But so I decided to take a look at it. I don't always look at the things that they recommend, but this time I decided to, and I saw that it wasn't too long. It was 4 episodes. It's a total of only about 2 hours and 45 minutes. And what it is one of the producers of Reply All, Shruti Pinamanini, found this blog when she was doing some investigating online that was written by a prisoner in a maximum security prisoner, a guy who had been convicted of murder, and she got kind of interested in this. Now, she wasn't looking into it as a true crime story. She was more interested in it as from the blog angle, and how did he get this blog out there? And it turns out it's his mother. He's writing letters to his mother, and his mother learned how to use the internet just so that she could put his writings into a blog. So it's entirely her idea, because he's never used the internet. He's been in jail for over 20 years, since like the early or mid-90s. for this murder. So it's all about I guess it is an investigation into his case and whether he got treated unfairly, whether he's innocent or not, or guilty. And there are, similar to the first season of Serial, there are interviews with him. For the most part, they're over the phone, although in the final episode, there is she actually went to the prison and interviewed him face to face. So this ran for 4 episodes, and the series is called On the Inside, parts 1 through 4, and it's episodes 64 through 67 of Reply All. And that's the name of the podcast. And the guy's name is Paul Madrowski. And so I went back. So I listened to the first 2 episodes earlier this week. I listened to episodes, the 3rd and 4th ones in this series, on the drive down to Charlotte. And then I also listened to the Crime Writers On episode, because I started to listen to the Crime Writers On earlier this week, and then when they said you really should go back and listen to this first, so then I put that on hold. So I went back, and they do a good job of talking about it, and it was interesting to hear their perspectives on this series. And they gave it very high marks, and I would give it high marks too. I do give it high marks. No, I do. So that was some of the podcasts I listened to. And that's like 4 hours of podcasts right there, if you listen to all that. Another thing I listened to was God in Comics, which is a podcast that I I subscribe to, and I listen to every episode. And this week's episode was on forgiveness. God in Comics is a podcast done by 3 priests, and they actually had a 4th, he was a priest, on this episode. And as I said, the theme was forgiveness. And so they talked about forgiveness in comic books. They talked about Daredevil Born Again a little bit. They talked about Astro City. They talked about Kingdom Come. And I think there was a couple others, but I don't think they were things that I've read. And I hadn't read all of the Astro City stuff. I've only read the first 6 issues of Astro City, so they kind of spoiled it a little bit, the Astro City part, but I'm sure I won't remember everything that they said if and when I finally get around to reading those issues of Astro City. I also listened to Pulp Crazy, which the latest episode is called Blood of Ancient Opar with Christopher Paul Carey, in which the host of Pulp Crazy, I'm blanking on his name now. I hate it when I do that. But anyway, the host of Pulp Crazy, Jason Aiken, talked with Christopher Paul Carey about his book, Blood of Ancient Opar, which I believe is a sequel to his previous book. And I haven't read either of them. And actually, the way he described it, I believe it's one story, the 2 books. So it's kind of like he broke the story into 2 books, maybe because it was a little too long for one book. But that was interesting. And I started to listen to Kevin Pollak Chat Show with David Foster, and that's 2 hours long. I'm about halfway through that. And that's what I was listening to when I arrived at the hotel. So, my third stop, after Madison Heights, I drove for about another 2 hours and 20 minutes. And I stopped in Thomasville, North Carolina. I was ready for a bathroom break. My back really wasn't bothering me. And I had plenty of water to drink. I'd bought water at my second rest stop. So I really wasn't there very long. And then I took off. I checked my directions to the hotel. I had about 75 miles to go. It said it should take about an hour and a half. I really wasn't sure if I would be able to make it in an hour and a half, because I could see from the map on my cell phone that there was some congestion in some places on 85. And I definitely hit that congestion. There's some construction, and so it's down to 2 lanes in some places. And it was just very slow. There was some stop and go. And that lasted for, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 miles. And then finally, just before I needed to exit 85, it cleared up. But I made it I left there at probably about 20 after 5, and I got to the hotel at 6:45, 6:45. So I was very pleased that the prediction of the time was actually correct, because that hasn't always been the case. And then when I got here, I decided to go out for dinner once I checked in and dropped my stuff off in my room. And I went to a place called Moe's Original Barbecue, where I had ribs and baked beans and coleslaw and cornbread and some cherry soda. Now, I'd looked this place up when I was back in D.C., and it sounded like a good place. I wanted to eat some barbecue while I was down here. And it's close to the hotel where I'm staying, and I'm not staying in downtown Charlotte this year. I decided to try something a little further out, try to do something similar to what I do with Baltimore Comic Con. Well, Baltimore Comic Con is close enough to home that I don't need to get a hotel room. I just stay at home and drive in each day, and it's like a 45-minute drive there. So I found a place, a hotel, which is actually south of Charlotte, just outside of, not too far outside of the city limits, in a town called Matthews, North Carolina, which is also where this Moe's Original Barbecue is. And so I'm staying there, and I'm getting a better rate. I think even with taxes, I think it's only coming out to something like $90 a night, and I'm staying by myself like I usually do. But it was a good meal. It wasn't quite as upscale as I thought it might be, because I don't know, I hadn't looked at pictures of the place. I'd only read the reviews. But it was one of those places where you go in, you order at the counter, and then they give you a number to put on your table, and then they bring the food to you. So it was like $14 for everything that I mentioned before: ribs, coleslaw, baked beans, cornbread, and the soda. So that seemed very reasonable. And actually, I ordered a meal which was supposed to have only 4 ribs, and they gave me 5. So, hey, I can't complain about that. So that's about it for today. Tomorrow's the first day of Heroes Con. It doesn't start until 11, but I think because I bought a 3-day pass, I get to go in a half hour early. That's my recollection from prior years. So I'll be able to get into the show at 10:30. My plan is to drive to the link station that's closest to here, which is, I think, the end of the line, and they've got a big parking garage there. I'm going to park there, and I'm going to take the links in, which is what I've done the last 2 times. I think in 2014 and 2015 I also did that, except for I was a little closer in than I am here. And I don't know, it's probably a 10-minute drive to the link station or something like that from here, maybe 15 minutes. It's not right next door like it was at the last couple places, or in 2014 and 2015. In one case, I was at a hotel that was right across the street from the link station. So that's my plan for Friday, and there's a place that I'm going to eat that I know about called Lola's, which I ate at I ate lunch there on Friday last year, which is very nice. It's just across the street from the convention center. And I'm not sure about dinner yet. I've got 2 places picked out. One's Indian, and one is Thai? No, Vietnamese. And they're both down here. They're either in Matthews or they're very close to Matthews, but they're not too far from the hotel. So I don't have any plans really other than that for the evenings. I want to make some recordings just like I'm doing right now. I have 2 commissions waiting for me to pick up. I've already paid for them online through PayPal. I've seen one of them, and the other one I haven't seen yet, but my guess is that the guy who did it, actually I've gotten stuff from both these people before. Although one of them, it's the first time I've actually gotten a commission from him. Okay. No, I'll talk about those the next. Yeah, I'm not going to say who they are right now. That'll be in the next recording. But I've met them both, and they're both very nice guys, and I like both their work. They're different. So So I have 2 of those. I've already picked out some panels I want to go to. I can't remember off the top of my head what are the ones that I wanted to go to tomorrow. I know there's at least 2 that I picked out. And of course, as always, I've looked through the entire panel schedule, and there's always multiple panels that I want to go to that are happening at the same time. So hopefully some of these will get recorded. I'm pretty sure the Dollar Bin is going to record some of these, at least the ones that they host. Excuse me. At least the ones that they host, and hopefully they'll get those out fairly quickly, or at least within a month or so, hopefully. And I plan to tape some panels, although there's one panel I've got a feeling they're going to specifically say, please don't tape this, and when I get to that point, and that's on Saturday, and I'll discuss why, if that's the case, afterwards. And that's why I want to go to the panel, because I don't think it's going to get taped. So I think that's about it for day 0 and for my thoughts about preparing for Heroes Con. I know this thing is going to be over before I want it to be. I'm glad I rented a car, drove down. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention about the car. Yes, this is a automatic transmission. My car is old, and it's a standard transmission. In other words, it has a clutch, and you have to shift the gears manually. Well, on 2 occasions, one of them I wasn't going very fast, but on 2 occasions I forgot that I wasn't driving my own car, or that I wasn't driving a standard transmission, and I went to hit the clutch, and I hit the brake. Luckily, I didn't hit it too hard, but the first time I was really confused because I was listening to a podcast. I can't remember exactly which one it was, but I was listening to a podcast, and I couldn't figure out at first what was going on, why the car was stopping, what I was trying to do. And it wasn't until after the car had finally stopped and I didn't hit the brake real hard because when I'm driving my car, the left foot is for the clutch and the right foot alternates between the brake and the gas. And so because I'm coming to a stop, if I'm driving a standard transmission, the first thing I do is I hit the clutch and then I take the car out of gear and put it into neutral as I slow down, as I'm getting. And so that's what I did without thinking. I just hit what I thought was the clutch, but was actually the brake. I shouldn't have been doing anything with my left foot. I should have just been using my right foot. But so luckily that didn't. I haven't had any mishaps in the car so far. But it's worked out quite well. And I think that's about it for now. I'm going to eat breakfast tomorrow at the hotel. Saturday and Sunday, I'm probably going to drive in and park and pay like $5, whatever, to park for the day. But tomorrow I don't want to because it's a work day, and the Lynx also runs much better on the weekdays than it does on the weekends. I've tried taking the Lynx in on Saturday the last couple of years, and it's like a half hour between trains. So if you get lucky, good. If you don't get lucky, well, you may have a long wait for the train. Whereas on weekdays, it's like every 10 minutes or something like that, at most. But so that's it for day 0 for Heroes Con 2016. That's it for episode 113 of Dave Talks Comics, but my coverage of Heroes Con 2016 continues in episode 114, where I will be talking about day 1 of the convention. I'm Dave. Thank you for listening.